Welcome to Storywise YouTube audiobook channel. Today, we're diving into a stunning literary journey with Convalescenza by Han Kang, the acclaimed South Korean author behind The Vegetarian and Human Acts. Han Kang's work is a masterful exploration of human fragility, healing, and the interplay between our bodies and minds. Convalescenza is no exception. It takes us through the delicate process of recovery, not just of the body, but of the soul. Prepare to be immersed in poetic prose, haunting imagery, and profound reflections that linger long after the final word. So, grab your headphones, settle in, and let's embark on this mesmerizing tale together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to join us for more incredible stories. Let's begin.
Part 1.
You're looking at holes that are a centimeter in diameter. These holes are just below your ankles, swollen, where the ligaments running down the tibiae deviate sharply towards the back of the feet, indicating the substance. Light gray in the hole on the left, the doctor asks why. Didn't she treat it immediately after she burned herself? The right goes. Good, but on the left the fabric is in pretty condition. Serious. The doctor, close to 40 years old, has cut hair. Very short like a high school student. The white coat. Not starched, it is limp, perhaps because today is Saturday. You may have to undergo anesthesia and operate, but before we get to that we will keep it under review. Also, if it is late, there is still a chance that the tissue will grow back. If we take care of it properly. Frightened by the word operate, you ask, when will we know if we need to operate or not? In 3 days. The doctor looks at the calendar. For the moment, take the antibiotics and do the work. Laser treatments. Then we'll see. You stare at the doctor's indigo fountain pen, which moves frantically over your medical record, tracing words. Illegible. The doctor is calm and cool. He doesn't seem to be able to understand a patient who burned herself 5 days ago and did nothing until the wound became infected. You limp out of the surgery with your parts bandaged. Discoveries. Pant legs rolled up to knee. You have your computer bag on your shoulder, a umbrella in hand, and shoes only half on. A nurse at reception calls you, making sure that your shoes don't touch the wounds. You walk cautiously towards the desk, where the nurse explains to you that laser treatments and impregnated gauzes are not covered by insurance. After paying and picking up a prescription with an effort, huge, dragging his shoes only with his toes, you arrive at the laser therapy room at the end of the corridor. But shouldn't they be disinfected again? Ask. After making your way through a crowd of people with umbrellas in hand. A young-looking nurse. He replies in a smug tone. He doesn't already have them. Do you disinfect the doctor? Laser therapy also sterilizes. Don't worry. You sit down and put your feet on the table. The machine for laser therapy, which resembles a three-way lamp, only 10 times larger, begins to shoot a web of red rays. These spread radially by investing a very large area, including the white sheet and yours.
Feet.
Don't look because the rays could damage them.
Eyes.
Ignoring the nurse's warning, he has already left the room. Look into the hole under the left ankle.
Not.
You can take your eyes off the moving rays like red veins, stirring above the infected gray tissue. It's a Saturday afternoon in late autumn, and at the crossroads there is a lot of coming and going in front of the hospital. Rain is falling all morning, but now it stopped. Young women wearing wool miniskirts with leggings and high school kids with shirt sleeves rolled up, holding basketballs in their hands and cola cans. They pass by you, touching you, their bodies. They give off an intense smell of perfume and sweat. To avoid the cosmetics representative, holding a basket of plastic full of samples, smiling superficially with your eyes, look down. Quickly descend into a subway underpass under construction.
Steps.
Next to a shop selling discounted cell phones. Get one up. Flight of stairs that seems to never end. You keep forgetting where you were until recently for what treatment you have undergone and where you are headed. After being re-emerging from the underpass, you stop, distracted by the rhythm. of music wafting from an electronics store, with the doors wide open and the deafening noise of bulldozers that dig incessantly into the asphalt. Suddenly you come to your senses and check if the antibiotics are still in the front pocket of the computer bag. You already forgot how much you like jokes, witty, and how much I cared about your appearance. You already have. I forgot that you always wore high heels because you're short. You loved wearing nonconformist clothes, come on. Bright colors, that you wore mostly white and yellow scarves. And that in your downturned eyes there was always a hint of
playfulness.
Now, with the black turtleneck sweater, the wool jacket, black cotton trousers, and black shoes, you look like one schoolgirl in her last year of primary school.
Sin.
Right now you don't even wear lip gloss, though. Don't talk about makeup, you look exactly your age, more 30 years old. The burns were from 5 days ago after you sprained his left ankle. Even if you weren't high on it, bad enough to need acupuncture, you're gone. In any case, in an Oriental medical center in your neighborhood, you said to the doctor, a herbalist in her 50s, who wore a modernized traditional Korean dress. With gusto, I sprained my right ankle first, but I didn't give it any weight, and it still hasn't healed completely. This time I sprained my left hand, so I would like to heal it. As it should. The doctor made you lie down on the table and has applied needles to both ankles. Why do you have those dark circles under your eyes? He asked. I am tired. How did he sprain his ankle? I was in the mountains. The doctor focused on the ankles, still with the ankles. Needles stuck in, beams of hot light, and called a nurse. The nurse will cauterize the affected area with the moxa. If we cauterize it with large moxa grains, like a grain of rice, chronic pain will also disappear. The doctor took a marker and drew a point on the ligament under each malleolus. It will burn because it is direct cauterization, but it will be one quick thing. That's fine with you, right? Without any apprehension, you replied. Yes. That day you discovered that the type of cauterization that it is done by placing a burning mass of moxa over the part injured until the underlying skin is burned is called direct cauterization. Even though you put it there, really all to bear the pain, you shouted. The nurse, like a gentle executioner, comforted you by saying, it's nothing. It will all be over in no time. You have continued to complain as your left ankle was burned. Suddenly you realized that the moans that escaped from your throat were identical to those from yours older sister. The nurse was shocked by your silent tears, which continued to flow without stop as if from a tap that someone had forgot to close properly. They didn't stop. Not even while you were clumsily putting on your socks and shoes. You paid for the treatment with your credit card, and you headed towards an elevator after leaving the center.
Doctor.
Immediately after going to the medical center, you were completely absorbed in your work. Since you had to be absent unexpectedly for 4 days. You had a lot of backlogs. You half brushed your teeth. Asleep, you took a 5-minute shower and 6 run to the bus stop without drying your hair, so as not to be late for planning meetings. You wrote lyrics for radio shows wandering between libraries and bars, moving the laptop weighing 2 kilos, whose battery could run out in any time. Every time, you couldn't hold on. Eyes open, you were drinking coffee, talking on a hot cell phone with the guests of the show, and checked the recordings without leaving your seat in front of the computer in the study. In all that time, you were not there. Notice that in the cauterized point on the left ankle, yes, a blister was forming, which this one had burst underneath the sock, and that the part was starting to get infected
and swell.
Every time you felt a pang of pain, you assumed it was because of the sprain. In the end, Saturday morning, when you couldn't stand the pain and you lowered your sock in the recording room, you realized that it was quite serious. After having took a look at the wound, the producer, an irascible guy, he asked you what happened, and when he found out it was left speechless. But anyway, Miss Jong, how could it be so ignorant? He should have known. He doesn't know what one burn should be treated immediately, even if it is Very small. He doesn't think he might lose a hand. Or a foot. You are now leaning against the transparent acrylic panel of the bus stop. Read the writings distractedly. Colorful advertisements for a surgery clinic. Aesthetics of the neighborhood, glued to the panel. Would you be satisfied with receiving a fake gold ring from him? Oh, wouldn't you prefer a diamond instead? The beginning of a new life. Great aesthetic surgery clinic. You don't understand them and read them again, this time more.
Slowly.
After fixing the 2 question marks and 2 exclamations, you raise your face. What number is it? To reawaken that simple memory, you frown. What bus should you take to go home? Do you think you know how to recognize the familiar number when the bus will appear, but you are staring at more than 10 with
different numbers as they stop and start again?
It never was. Success. The numbers all seem strange to you. Everyone. They conspire to reject you. Then you understand. You can't remember the number of the bus that will take you to yours studio apartment because you feel obligated to go to your parents' house. Your parents, knowing that it would be better this way. You know you have to go visit your parents this weekend. Parents to comfort them. Even if you don't make any effort. You, the only remaining daughter, will give them comfort simply by that fact.
To be there.
But you're trying to avoid it. You want to be alone. You rarely got to see your sister in her later years. 3 months of life, when he was fighting the disease. She didn't want to see you. Of course, you hadn't heard from each other in a long time. Even though she was your only sister, you knew everything of the disease only through your mother. Tall and slender, your sister stood out. The features of his face were delicate. People thought that you, ugly, I had grown up with an inferiority complex, but it wasn't true. It was your sister who suffered from a complex of inferiority. You couldn't understand why she was jealous of everyone. Your flaws. She was envious of you because you are simple and stubborn because you had chosen a faculty that he didn't choose. No one because at 30 you still hadn't had one decent love story. Why not getting along with your parents, especially with your father? Not. You were receiving no real financial help from them, and why? You led an unstable life, still paying, at your age, a monthly rent for your studio apartment. She had married a handsome man who was 8 years older, owner of a solid company, lived in a luxury apartment with a living room overlooking a river and a storefront where they were. Tableware worthy of a royal family is displayed. Nevertheless, he seemed to keep his life at a distance, as if he were avoiding it. Nauseating smelling food. One day you asked yourself. You wondered what went wrong and where. You wondered which of the two was colder. You or yours.
Sister?
It happened when you were in your first year of university and your
sister to the last.
It must have been the Monday of the second year, of the 3rd week of December, because it was immediately after the end of the autumn term. When that morning she said, "Please take me somewhere," you asked, "Where?" "To the hospital." You asked her what was wrong, and she replied, "Just accompany me." That morning it looked like it was going to snow heavily. Until she left the operating room after the abortion, you waited for her with clenched fists.
When
you hesitantly offered to hold her up, she became furious. When you found a taxi, he got into the back seat saying, "I'll lie down a bit. Get in front." The snow seemed about to pour heavily from the sky, but not a single flake had yet fallen. In anticipation of Christmas, the streets were crowded. A queue. Endless number of cars with their taillights on waiting for the traffic light came on to turn left. Sitting on the seat front, you still had your fists clenched, and every now and then you turned around, watching your sister huddled behind you. You had pain in my throat as if I had a cold. Your sister didn't have to ask you anything. He knew you were there. Only person who would never tell that secret to anyone, including your parents, because he knew that you loved me very much. Despite this, your sister has not since then. He loved you more. He didn't want to talk to you or even look at you in the eyes. For a few years you did everything to win back his heart, but one day you understood that None of your efforts would bring back his love, and you turned your back on her. His eyes were clear and deep. He had a long neck, and graceful, his nails always well-groomed. In summer his feet, small, visible between the leather straps of the sandals, they were enchanting. When you were admitted to university, he took you to a nice restaurant. After teaching you how to use a fork and Western-style knife, he gave you a chain with a little heart of gold. A necklace like this must be of gold, he recommended to you, with a serious look. Not silver or copper, who discredit you. With a bright smile, he continued, the women of our family does not need surgery eyelids because we have thin ones. But it would be better than that. I would do a plastic surgery to remove the epicanthus. Your eyes, they will seem much bigger. After leaving the restaurant, he took you around the shops. High fashion, but we were disappointed when you didn't buy the clothes he recommended. In the mirror, what did he do? Appear your legs particularly long because it was tilted. The little heart he had given you glimmered on yours
Neck.
You continued to shake your head, saying, no, this one. It's not me. Before the end of that year, late one evening you told her. In his room, I really can't understand how people can live prisoners of conventions, how can bear such a life. She was taking off her makeup, sitting in front of the mirror, with her back to you. For a moment his reflection darkened. Looking at you in the eyes from the mirror, he said, do you believe? But it could be. I want there to be people who consider themselves lucky. Say, because they can hide behind conventions. In that moment you seemed to understand her, confusedly, how? If I could distinguish a silhouette behind many layers of thin, white curtains. She wasn't a naive girl. She just wanted the safest place, a quiet shell like a turtle or a snail, a place like a solid sunken ovary. In an apple. You knew all about his efforts, which lasted almost 10 years for having a baby, expensive herbal teas from doctors, treatments of moxibustion below the navel until one is obtained, scar exams for assisted reproduction, all the times when he looked forward to undergoing treatment, hormonal, the cruel, repeated miscarriages. You were the only one who noticed that his face darkened every time that you appeared at family gatherings. Flashing a smile, radiant, you tried not to love your sister. There it is. You did everything you could to see her as a stranger.
You were trying not to.
Watching fondly as her nose wrinkled when he laughed like a naughty child. You tried hard not to awaken in you feelings of indescribable tenderness that they only feel towards the blood of their own blood, towards the people with whom he shared his childhood. You were trying to freeze your heart and to be as hard and cold as possible. You start to nod off. You start to nod off as soon as you sit next to the window at the back of the bus you got on after getting on. Finally remembered that familiar number. While the bus slides towards your house in the Plus Lane, congested road, while the announcements of stops and the advertisements blare from the speaker, you fall asleep without shame. The head that it hangs to the side, you first lean on the passenger's shoulder next to you, and then to the window. Your neck hurts in this one awkward position. Even if it would be better to wake you up, the eyelids droop relentlessly. You're sleeping after all. You even drool. You moan and moan like an old woman. Yours front slams against the window several times, making a big noise. You wipe your mouth with your hand. Raise yours. Eyelids sluggish, but collapse again. His weight had dropped to 37 kilos. She complained of pain until he lost consciousness. It hurts, it hurts. Bad, she said, crying softly, like a little girl. When begged your father, please, Dad, help me. To him, usually impassive, his chin trembled. Your brother-in-law, a big man, he turned away and said,
Cried.
Clasping her hand in his, your mother has whispered, my little girl, you don't have. I couldn't help but feel guilty. You couldn't do it unless you thought your presence was ruining his last moment of life. When you finally opened the Mouth trembling, and you try to call her. Oni. It was all finished. Waking up, you realize that your stop has passed. You hastily grab your bag and ring the doorbell. As you step onto an unfamiliar street, you look around. In all directions. After fixing the route of the bus attached to the panel, you realize that you have to go back for 3 stops only. What a relief. As you drive down a street with few cars and pedestrians, you start to feel more awake. When you get to the stop, you have your eyes completely where you should have gotten off. Open. Yet a residue of drowsiness softens the air around your dull face. When you finally arrive in front of the house, you stop. Look, your bicycle parked in the yard. With the laptop of 2 kilos weighing on your shoulder, you stay standing there, resisting the stinging pain you feel in your ankles. You're looking at your bike because it made you happy, because there's probably nothing you really have loved apart from cycling. Only then did you have the impression that your life was not irrevocable failure, and you were able to calmly free yourself from the feeling of perhaps being left out of all the dazzling happiness of this world. You are afraid to remember that joy. You're afraid of remember the dizzying speed of when you rode downhill, free down a slope, the exciting momentum of a run up the cycle path along the stream. Eventually you look away, go up the stone stairs and step at a time, the stairs that will take you to your home at 2nd floor. Open the door with the key and enter the dark room. Place your computer bag on the floor next to the entrance. Without taking off your shoes, you squat down on the cold floor covered with wax paper, and then you relax. Your sister asked her husband not to be cremated, but buried. You know why. Looking at one stupid TV show as a child, you saw a dead man coming back to life in the coffin, and she whispered to you, "Oh, Mama, that's better. What if they had cremated him?" Your father, who suffers from heart disease, is immediately after the funeral went home with his sister and her husband. Your mother, who climbed to the cemetery with the help of your brother-in-law, yes, slumped to the ground several times until the coffin was lowered into the pit. Afterwards, helping her down the hill, you took a bad twist and choked your eyes shut so that no one would have to worry about one.
Nonsense like that.
A week. Lying on the floor, you mumble to yourself. It's only been a week. Inside the shoes, you feel a stinging pain in the holes. Grayish on the ankles. No wax paper on the floor. Heated is freezing under the back and shoulders. That's right, it's only been a week. You still don't know that in 2 days you will show for the 2nd time your injuries to the doctor, and for the 3rd time, after another 2 days. Don't you know that the doctor will say, "Let's wait 1 more day. There's a ligament, muscles, and nerves down there, so that's it. Better not to operate if possible." You don't know that you will suffer after walking on the again tiptoe, and that you will have to pay the surcharge nocturnal because it will be after 6. You don't know what you'll stare at. The hole in your left ankle covered in laser beams, similar to a red spider web, and that looking at the fabric, dead grayish. You will remember when the wounds were bandaged and felt pain in the hole on your left ankle, but not on the right. You don't know. You'll think, nerves.
They are probably dead.
The doctor, probably me, will work to remove this dead area. The blood. It will flow from the living flesh all around. Don't you know you'll blink dry eyelids thinking such nonsense. Before it gets colder, without knowing what awaits you, you ask yourself while you are lying on the cold floor if it would be a sin to go in. Bike before it gets colder. You slowly sit up. You take off your shoes, take from the shoe rack a pair of white sneakers, all dirty, and you put them on without tightening the laces too much. You go down the stone stairs and calmly enter the courtyard shaded. Remove the chain from the bike under the awning.
And
a bicycle that you have used in the last 2 years. Diligently. Since you also went there during the days of summer rain, it has rusted here and there, although you dried it every time you took it and covered it with a plastic sheet. Raise the stand with your right foot and carry the bike on the street. Get on the seat. Place your right foot on the pedal. You give yourself a push with the left and you start to go down the sloping alley. There is a petrol station at the end of the alley, at the intersection with the road. Slow down just in case. Suddenly a car appears. Pull up to the sidewalk. And after waiting for the green light, you speed through the intersection, in the direction of the cycle path that runs along the bank of the stream. When you reach the ramp strongly inclined, stop pedaling and freewheel down. The willows, bare, with delicate black skeletons on display, they flank the embankment in groups. Under the withered broadleaf trees you speed up. The faster you go, the stronger the breeze becomes. To hear it, in the summer you came to cycle here, even at midday. In August you purposely went to the track under the scorching sun of noon, an hour when you sweated even if you were sitting motionless. The bicycle passed through the mass of a wind, heavy and damp. You were alive. Full of life, you cut through that air. Torrid. If you found yourself under a sudden downpour, you ran towards the nearest concrete bridge completely drenched by the rain. You felt the kind of joy that makes you scream at the top of your lungs for no reason. Last summer, while your sister was going back and forth to the hospitals with her husband's car, keeping it hidden from hers family, you felt that kind of ecstasy. He's finally regenerating. You don't know that your doctor will say this by looking at a tiny reddish spot, like a stitch made by a mechanical pencil in the middle of the grayish fabric in the hole on the left ankle. Even if the improvement is rather slow, judging by it. From this, there is no need to operate. All you know is your wound, which festers incessantly under the gauze and is uncovered twice a week for laser treatments. A large red spot will remain, as much as a point made by a mechanical pencil. You don't know what more than a month later that red spot will become 2 specks, and then it will grow and become a speck as large as it made by a large pencil. It's really slow. His is truly a very rare case. You don't know that the doctor, whose face will never appear to you again. Stranger, she will fake a laugh by furrowing her brow. You continue pedaling, without knowing any of this. You pass by the place under the bridge, where you usually hang out. You sheltered from the rain. You get over the wild geese that you always admired. You see them preening their feathers with their beaks, aimed at the base of the neck curved in a semicircle. You see a red-crowned crane, white with a red spot on it. Head, which has grown a lot since last summer. He has the black legs, invisible because they are underwater. After having pedaled a little more, you see an old gray heron, who stands still in the middle of the water with a lost gaze. In the distance, once upon a time you felt an intimate emotion at thought that such a large bird would lead such a silent existence and moved so slowly. You stopped the bicycle and looked at him for a long time. But now you don't stop. You keep pedaling. Come on. Give way to a group of cyclists with helmets, glasses, and masks that cover the nose and mouth. They come whizzing by from the opposite direction. You feel pain in your ankles. It is not. It's clear whether it depends on the sprain or the burn. You think that you will continue to cycle anyway. It's not necessary. That you are afraid of joy. You don't feel joy. There are some scars on your body. A scar on your knee that you got while playing a game with the neighborhood kids when you were 9, a game in which you wanted to find out which of you reached the furthest. Jumping from the swing. Scars on the leg and back of the hand you made when the not very solid chair on which you went up to close a little window and lost a screw and gave way, and a burned scar on his index finger when you dipped your finger in boiling oil while cooking some ravioli for some middle school friends you had invited home at the last moment. She also had a scar. He got injured once. You were playing hide and seek together. She was the one. Blindfolded. He tripped over a chair leg after that. You had stumbled. You didn't do anything to yourself, but she, who was tall, she hit her forehead on the corner of a dressing table. Dad was very angry with you, as if it were your fault. You too have that scar on his beautiful one. Very intelligent forehead seemed ugly. After that accident, to hide the stitch marks, she always wore bangs. But every time it was windy, you couldn't help but notice the whitish scar visible only to you. You, who were a little girl, continued to cry while they stitched the wound until your eyes became all red, for your father and mother were both in the operating room. You were waiting alone in the corridor, and this scared you even more. Finally, she left the room and tried to console you with plasters and gauzes incredibly large on his forehead. He repeated with hesitation, "I'm fine. They say he will recover soon. It's just a matter of time. Everyone, they heal. You don't know. Don't you know that one cold morning, waking up early, thirsty, you will look at your eyes full of tears in the mirror over the sink after a dream you can't remember. You don't know that your hands will continue to shake when you throw water on your face. You don't know what those words you've never spoken will pinch your throat like a hot pin. I couldn't look either. After you. I've never been able to. I was just trying to hold on. I tried to hold on, otherwise I would. I felt anxious. Don't you know that on a Tuesday afternoon in the distant future, when a nurse removes the gauze from your ankles, scarlet blood will flow copiously. You don't know what they'll do to you. Bad. Don't you know that surprisingly the dripping liquid from the plague will diminish quickly? Don't you know that one Sunday evening after visiting your mother, you will draw the curtain so as not to see the snow? It slowly descends into the alley like spread wings. Your mother will be convinced to go out more, as her arthritis knees has gotten worse precisely because he almost never goes out. You don't know about the night you'll have to face, crouching at the center of a completely dark room. How much? Distant? Far, far away. You don't know that for the whole. At night you will try to sleep, curled up and with headphones on, so as not to remember your sister's voice in that dark alley that you took with your eyes closed going to your grandparents, motherly, shaking his hand. You don't know that you will persist in remembering the moment when she returned it to you silently, without even unwrapping it. The scarf that you had given her after receiving yours first salary. You don't know that you will turn endlessly from one side and the other, struggling with those insistent questions and burning what you should have done when you decided to walk away from her forever, when you couldn't read what was hidden behind his expressionless eyes. Which other path would you have taken to not be surprised to realize that you too are a person, frighteningly cold? Not knowing all these things, you now lie at the edge of a reed thicket. Your bicycle hit a boulder near the torrent, and the wheels spin wildly in vain. The moment you fell, you instinctively shielded your head. Of course, you peeled the skin on your hands and fingers, elbows. You feel a dull pain in your shoulder and pelvis, which they hit the ground. Lying on the wet ground, you murmur, "Nonsense." Type. You no longer feel the wound in the grayish holes. It makes you. His right eye hurt because some dirt got into it. Beat your eyelids several times, and you think that all these pain sensations are too weak. You pray softly, repeatedly a God no matter what, so that you can do not heal from what you suffer from at this moment, because the cold ground can become even colder, so that your face and body will freeze completely, and you'll never get up again. Part 2. The Fruit of My Woman. Chapter 1. It was the end of May when I first saw the bruises on my wife's body. A day when lilacs in the flower bed near the caretaker's lodge, they scattered petals similar to severed tongues, and the entrance to the senior center was strewn with decaying white flowers, trampled by shoes of passers-by. The sun was almost at its zenith. Its light, which was the color of the flesh of a peach, ripe, dripped onto the living room floor, spilling countless grains of dust and pollen. That warm, sweetish light poured onto the back of my white tank top while my wife and I browsed the Sunday morning newspaper. The week just gone by had also been marked from the exhaustion I had felt for months now. In the end, week I was lazing in bed late and had woken up from a few minutes. Lying on your side, you slowly moved your limbs. Weak to find a more comfortable position, scrolling the daily as slowly as possible. Do you mind taking a look here?
I don't understand why.
These bruises have not cleared up. Instead of understanding the meaning of his words, I registered as a mere interference in the fabric of the silence. I looked up at her absent-mindedly. I sat up, keeping her finger on the article. I was reading. I rubbed my eyes with the palm of my hand. My wife had lifted her tank top up to bra. His back and belly were studded with deep bruises. How did you get them? He rotated his torso, just enough for me to see them. Vertebrae that came up from the zipper of the pleated skirt. Blue bruises the size of a baby's fist, defined, as if they were printed in ink. Well, as you are. Facts. My abrupt and insistent tone pierced the tranquility. Space enclosed in our 60-meter apartment. Squares. I don't know.
I just thought I had to have
thrown somewhere without realizing it, and that bruises would have gone away. Instead, they are becoming bigger. My wife avoided my gaze like a cultured child.
Wrong.
A little regretful of having given the impression of scolding her, I tried to soften my tone. Doesn't it hurt? No, not at all. In fact, where there are bruises, I feel nothing. But this is even more worrying. The guilty expression that I had noticed for a few moments before it had vanished without a trace, replaced by a mild and incongruous smile. That smile was joking about. Lips of my wife as she asked me if she should go to the hospital. Feeling strangely indifferent, I examined her face. My wife with a cold and detached look. The face that, in front of me, it seemed like that of a stranger. A stranger. Almost unreal, an unexpected sensation. Since we were in our 4th year of living together. My wife was 3 years younger than me. She had just recently turned 29. When we were dating before marry us, her face looked young in a way. Embarrassing. They often took her for a high school student.
Now,
he showed clear signs of fatigue, which contrasted with his air of candid innocence. It was unlikely that someone could still mistake her for a high school girl, or even for a university student. On the contrary, she looked older than her age. His cheeks, of the color of unripe apples in which the red had barely began to surface, they were hollowed out like clay.
Pressed.
His life, first soft and supple like one sweet potato seedling, and the belly which contributed to that attractive set of curves, they were now thin to make compassion. I tried to remember the last time I had seen him. My wife naked, and with sufficient light. Certainly not that year. I wasn't even sure it had happened. The year before. How was it possible that I hadn't noticed those bruises like that, marked on the body of the only person I lived with? I tried, counting the fine wrinkles radiating from the corners of the eyes. Then I told her to take off all her clothes.
A
flush of redness appeared along the line of her cheekbones, which they had become since she had lost weight. Unseemly sharp.
He tried to protest.
What if someone sees? Unlike many other apartments, arranged in such a way to overlook a garden or a car park, ours, it had a veranda overlooking the busy street, headed east. Since we were hundreds of meters away from the nearest block from which both the road and the road separated us, the Chungnang River, it would have been impossible to anyone spying on us without a powerful telescope, and certainly not. There was danger of someone looking into our living room from one of the cars whizzing by below. So taken. My wife's objection as a sign of embarrassment. When we were newly married on weekends in that same living room, with the French window opening onto the veranda and the window on the opposite side, wide open into, we made an attempt to mitigate the torrid August heat. Love several times in broad daylight, exploring awkwardly that things so new to us, until finally, we didn't give in to tiredness. After about a year, we were more accustomed to our love, and the ardor of those early times gradually faded.
My
wife went to bed rather early, and was sleepy. Unusually deep. If I came home late, I could stay. certain to find her already asleep. When I turned the key in the lock and set foot in the apartment, alone and with no one to welcome me when I washed and entered the dark bedroom, the steady rhythm of his breathing seemed inexplicably desolate to me. I hugged, hoping to alleviate that sense of loneliness. His half-open eyes, dimmed by sleep, did not understand in the slightest if he was rejecting mine hug or was returning it with warmth. I got over it. Just silent fingers in your hair until the movements of my body ceased. All? Do you want me to take everything away from me? With his face contorted into a grimace in an effort not to burst into tears, my wife crumpled up the laundry underwear that she had just taken off and covered her pubis. And here is his naked body, totally exposed to the sun.
Spring. It had been a really long time.
Yet I didn't feel even the faintest awakening of the
wish.
Seeing not only the yellowish-green bruises on his buttocks, but also on his ribs and shins. Seeing that they even disfigured her white skin. Of the inside of the thighs, I was suddenly seized by a great anger, but then just as suddenly, that anger passed me, leaving in its place an unmotivated sadness. Perhaps the night, in that woman whose mind wandered like this. Easily, he had dissolved the memory of when, walking down the street one evening, senses already numb, from the falling curtain of sleep she had crashed into a car that was going slowly, or, when it was, tumbled down the dark emergency stairs of ours building, the figure of my wife, who stood covering her pubes as the late spring sun poured onto his back, asking absent-mindedly if he should go to the hospital. It was just too pathetic, too much miserable to describe in words, so I felt pervaded by a sadness that I hadn't felt for a long time. I could only hold his body, all skin and bones, close to me.
Chapter 2.
I thought everything would be fine. For this reason that spring day I had embraced the bony body of my wife and I said, if they don't hurt, then the bruises, they will disappear soon. Once upon a time you didn't get into things like that. Messes, huh? I softened my rebuke with a resounding
laugh.
One evening in early summer, the wind saturated with heat rubbed the own cheeks sticky against the leaves of others. Sycamores and the streets with bloodshot eyes. They went from light to darkness in an instant. My wife, who was sitting at the table in front of me while we were having a late dinner, he loudly put down the tablespoon. I completely forgot about the bruises. Well, that's strange. Take another look. After examining her haggard arms, were sticking out of the short sleeves, my wife took them off. Abruptly, shirt and bra. A groan escaped me from my throat before I could choke it out. The bruises that in the spring were as big as the fist of a newborn baby now looked like large colocasia leaves. What's more, they had darkened. They had the dull color of branches of a weeping willow, whose light green at first of summer it seems tinged with a light shade of blue. I reached out a shaking hand and patted a shoulder, bruised by my wife. I had the impression of touching the body of a stranger. How badly she must have hurt herself, though have bruises like that. Thinking about it, I noticed that that day my face was too. Wife was burnished blue, as if sprinkled with saturnine water. His once shiny hair was fragile as withered radish leaves. The white of eyes had a pale indigo hue, as if the ink of his unusually black pupils were there, distilled by dyeing it. His wet eyes sparkled. Why is this thing happening to me? I always have. Want to go out? And as soon as I go out, or rather, as soon as I see the sunlight, I feel the urge to take off my clothes. It's like if my body wanted to get rid of it. My wife got up, offering myself in plain sight, more than he had done in all last year, his naked, withered body. The other one. Yesterday I went out on the porch with nothing on and I'm left standing next to the dryer, without knowing if someone could see me, and without even trying to hide. In short, as if I were crazy. I stayed Sitting, just staring at my wife's gaunt torso as he approached me, I rubbed my fingers nervously on the chopsticks I held in my hand. I also lost the appetite. I drink more water than before, though, in a day. I can't even swallow half a bowl of rice.
And
Since I don't eat, I think gastric secretion doesn't happen correctly or something.
although,
I force myself to eat. I don't digest well, and I continue to vomit. He sank to his knees like a marionette, whose strings had been cut, and hid his face on mine.
thigh.
Wasn't he crying? A hot slick and wetness formed on my tracksuit bottoms. Do you know what it feels like to vomit several times a day?
And
Like getting seasick even if you're on land. You have to walk hunched forward. It is impossible to stand straight. Your head hurts like your right eye.
drilled.
Your shoulders are as stiff as a piece of wood. Lots of saliva, yellow gastric juice on the pavement, on the roots of the trees at the edge of the road. You could hear the intense buzz of an insect coming from the flickering neon lamp. Under that dark light, my wife, with a bruise on her back the size of a catalpa leaf, managed to repress his oozing.
I whine.
Go to the hospital, I told her, looking at her face. Tomorrow, go straight to the internal medicine department. His wet, mottled face was unpleasant to look at. As I ran my fingers through her brittle hair, I gave her a toothy smile. And be careful how you go there.
Not.
You want to get hurt again, huh? You're not a little girl. Falls and bumps into things. My wife's wet face quivered as it opened into a smile, and then a single tear that was clinging to her lips stretched out and fell. Chapter 3. My wife had always had that propensity to tears.
No.
The first time I had seen her cry, he was 26 years old. As a girl, she had been more prone to laughter, her voice always permeated with joy, laughter like a touch of color. I had heard that voice tremble for the first time, whose calm maturity usually contrasted with his appearance. Youthful, when he told me, I hate living in the Sangidong Tower blocks. 700,000 people crammed together. I feel that. I will wither and die. I hate these hundreds, thousands of identical buildings with identical kitchens, identical ceilings, bathrooms, identical bathtubs, verandas and elevators, and I hate parks, rest areas, shops, crossings, pedestrians. I hate them all. Hey, what's up? Having paid more attention to the voice, subdued from my wife, than to what was really going on, saying, I spoke as if I wanted to calm someone down. Irritable little girl. What's so detestable about so many people who live nearby? I had assumed a slightly stern expression while I looked her in the eyes, his eyes vivid and sparkling. When I rented a room, I always made sure that Yes was located in a lively neighborhood. I only moved in areas teeming with people, where deafening music is. It poured into the streets, and cars clogged the streets.
Trumpeting.
I wouldn't have made it otherwise. There isn't. I would have let her be alone, even if it dried. Cheeks with the back of the hand, the tears came immediately, replaced in a continuous flow, and now it's as if I were to sink into a long illness and die.
As
If I were no longer able to get off this 13th, slowly, I would no longer be able to go out. Why are you taking so long? Seriously, it's a bit exaggerated. The first year we lived in this building, my wife had been ill quite often. She was used to it, to the natural environment of a rented room in one of the hilly districts of Seoul, and his body seemed incapacitated to adapt to a stuffy apartment with the central heating. His energy levels were collapsed quickly, allowing no more than one brisk walk once a day up the steep climb that led to the small publishing house where he worked for one. Misery. But it's not because of our marriage that he had left work. Indeed, only after she had left him, not much later, I had spoken to her concretely about marriage. She had taken all the money she had, everything he had put aside, plus the severance pay, and the extra earned with part-time weekend jobs. He planned to leave the country. I want to go and infuse some fresh blood into my veins, he said. That day he finally had handed over the letter of resignation to his direct superior. He told me he wanted to renew the bad blood that it clogged her veins with clots and cleared her tired lungs with pure air. To live and die freely was his. I've been dreaming since she was a child, she said. I had always postponed because it was never the right time, but now he felt he had saved enough money to turn his dream into reality. He meant to choose a country, settle there for about 6 months, and then move elsewhere.
And so on.
I want to do it before I die, you know, he said, and he had let out a soft laugh. I want to see the borders of the world. Push myself as far as possible, just a little at a time. But in the end, instead of traveling to the borders of the world, my wife had invested all her lean finances in the down payment for this apartment and in expenses for our wedding. He had motivated me in just one short sentence, saying that he had done it because I won't separate myself from you. How concrete that of his had been. That dream of freedom? Not much, I had deduced, since he had been able to give it up so easily. Perhaps it had only been a romantic and unrealistic illusion. His projects were as unworkable as those a child makes. To go to the moon. Eventually, she must have realized. All this alone, and I had felt vague, moved and proud at the thought of provoking that belated realization. It could have been me. It probably just depended on his frequent ailments and pains, but when I saw my wife standing with the cheek pressed against the glass of the French window, he looked out onto the veranda, and his narrow shoulders hunched like leaves of cabbage viz, intent on staring at the cars that they whizzed by, I lost heart. He was so still. Only the incredibly faint sound of his breathing confirmed that she was still alive, as if a pair of arms invisible immobilized her shoulders, as if an enormous iron ball attached to an invisible chain prevented them even just to flex a muscle. In the middle of the night, and in the early hours of my morning, wife woke up with a start, disturbed by sporadic taxis or motorbikes roaring by in the deserted street. It's as if they weren't speeding the cars but the street, as if this apartment was swept away along with the roads, he said. Also, after the noise had faded into the distance and sleep he had reclaimed her body, my beautiful face, wife, appeared ghostly pale. One of those nights, he had murmured as if in a dream, hoarse voice only barely audible, all that stuff, where from she came? Where is everything going to? Chapter 4. The next evening, when I opened the front door, and I entered the apartment, I saw that my wife had come to welcome me, probably because he had heard my steps in the corridor. She was barefoot, and her nails, which in the last few times she hadn't cut herself often enough, they were from a sparkling white. What did they tell you at the hospitals? No response. After observing me in silence, as I took off my shoes, my wife turned around, tucking the lock of dull hair she had behind her ear, rested on his cheek. That profile, I thought. I remembered that, when they had us introduced for the first time, there was a placid silence established between us after my superior at work he was the one who acted as intermediary. He got up and left us alone. I was disconcerted by the reserved expression on the face of my future wife. He looked like he was in a faraway place, in some secret place. On that face, that, at first glance, it just seemed bright and beautiful. I had read an unsought solitude, apparently that of one totally different person, and that was what gave me the momentary belief that she understood me. Even then, when this belief and the alcohol I had drunk they had induced her to make a rash confession, viz. That I had felt alone all my life. The young woman who would become my wife had turned towards a distant horizon, leaving the same profile in front of me, cold and desolate, that I had before me now. You went to the hospital, right? My wife tilted the head in an imperceptible nod of assent. She had turned around to hide his unhealthy complexion, or was he angry with me? Please talk to me. What did the doctor say? That everything's fine, he said, but it was more of a breath than A statement. His voice was frighteningly flat. During our initial meeting, it had been his voice to make me feel more attracted to her.
It was a
Absurd comparison, but his voice made me think of an exquisitely lacquered tea table, one of those pieces of elegant furnishings that are brought out only for guests, most important, and on which it seems right to only serve tea, best in the most beautiful cups. That evening, without getting upset, faced with the confession that I had let slip, mine wife had replied to me in the usual staid way, and I had said, I want to live my whole life without ever settle anywhere. Afterwards, I talked about plants. I had told her about having dreamed of a veranda crowded with large flower boxes, each filled with lettuces and perilla. In summer on plants, perilla bloomed tiny flowers similar to snowdrops.
And
there were bean sprouts growing in the kitchen, I had added. This had finally torn a weak one. Laugh at my wife, who until then had stared at me with skeptical look as if all this talk about plants was strongly in contrast with the idea he had formed of
me.
Trying to hold on to the last echo of that innocent, fragile laughter, I repeated those words. Me. I have felt alone all my life. When we were married, I had put some planters in porch, as we had agreed, but neither of us. He had demonstrated that he had a green thumb. For some, even the most resistant vegetables are right, as I assumed. They just needed to be watered regularly, yes. They had dried up and died without ever ripening. Someone had said that our apartment was such a high floor was too distant from the energy of the ground. Someone else that our plants were all dying because the air and water were bad. They even told us that we lacked the goodwill needed to take care of a living creature, but that was simply it. False. The absolute dedication shown by my wife in taking care of those plants exceeded all expectations. If a lettuce or perilla plant wilted, it was enough to make her half fall into despair. While they seemed to cling tenaciously to life, she wandered around humming a cheerful tune. Whatever the reason, now in rectangular pots, only dry dirt remained on the veranda, where I wondered had all those dead plants gone.
And
those rainy days, when I had placed the pots on the windowsill so they could dip their hands in the cold showers, where had all those young days gone? My wife had told me, let's go somewhere far away, just the two of us. Unlike plants, which, yes, they revived at least a little when the leaves absorbed that bracing rain, my wife seemed to languish in an even deeper state of prostration.
And
it's impossible to live in this oppressive place, he said, holding out his emaciated hand over the lettuce leaves to intercept the rain and then shake it off on the veranda. This rain is dirty, he said, black with snot and saliva. His eyes had sought my consent. This isn't life, he said angrily. It just looks alike. His voice was aggressive, like I stumbled speeches of a drunk. This country is rotten. Nothing can grow here. Can't you see?
Not
trapped in this suffocating place and
deafening.
I couldn't take it anymore. What is suffocating? I couldn't stand those small, sharp blows that blindly shattered my new, precarious happiness, nor the blood of unhappiness, long repressed, that my wife's words made surface on his emaciated body. Answers. I had them. Sprinkled on the shoulders, the rain collected in the joined hands.
Cup.
What is suffocating? What's deafening? A soft moan escaped her. The scared hands. They hit her face blindly. The cold rain. It splashed on the glass of the French window, on my face. The vase on the windowsill, falling, had pierced the foot of my wife with her sharp corner before smashing on the veranda floor. Rough shards and lumps of soil had remained stuck to his clothes, to his feet naked. She had bent over, clutching her injured foot with her hands, and bit her lower lip. Biting his lip was a habit of his. Old date. Even before we got married, he did it every time I got angry or raised my voice.
Nibble on.
Lips seemed to help her put her thoughts in order, and after a while he began to respond to what I had said, or fact, calmly and logically explaining his opinions.
But
After that incident on the porch, lip biting became the only answer I could get from her. From that day we stopped arguing. Did the doctor say there's no problem? I felt an intense wave of tiredness and loneliness.
when
I took off my jacket. My wife didn't take it from me. He said he didn't find anything. He confirmed, his face still turned the other way.
Chapter 5.
Little by little my wife stopped completely.
Speak.
If I addressed her, she simply nodded or said, "Shake your head." If I raised my voice, demanding an answer, he simply stared into space with an ambiguous look in the eyes. His color continued to worsen, and the witch was now clearly perceptible even under the light dim of neon. Since the doctor had been unable to find anything that didn't work, maybe my wife didn't have a problem physical to the stomach or intestines, perhaps his was a simple case of nostalgia. But what could he possibly have nostalgia? The last 3 years had been the warmest and most peaceful of my life. My job wasn't too strenuous. I almost had it. I paid off the mortgage on the apartment, and I had a wife who, while not beautiful, had everything I had always desired in a partner. My fulfillment, it was like warm water lapping gently against the walls of a bathtub filled to the brim, caressing my exhausted body. So, what was my wife's problem? If so, I longed for something. I couldn't imagine how this could be so serious as to cause a psychosomatic illness. Every time I was wondering if that woman really had the right to make me feel so alone. I felt like I was being pervaded in every fiber from an irrepressible aversion, which isolated me like a layer of old dust. On the morning of the following Sunday, the day before of my departure for a business trip abroad week, I watched my wife hang out the laundry on the veranda. The bruises on his arms had become so extensive that the white parts looked like negative, small bruises, light spots amidst all that blue. I gasped. When she returned with the empty laundry basket, I barred its street and peremptorily asked her to undress. Opposed resistance, but I took off her shirt, revealing one shoulder of an opaque dark blue. I staggered back and stared at his body. More than half some hair under the armpits, once thick, had fallen out, and his brown nipples, once smooth and soft, had faded. "We can't go on like this. I'll phone your mother." "Ninth," my wife shouted hastily with a slurred pronunciation, as if he were chewing his tongue. "You're going to the hospital, understand? Go to a dermatologist." "No, go to the polyclinic." She nodded silently. "You know I don't have time. Come with you. You know your body, so you have to maintain it in order, right?" He nodded again. "Listen to me. Collier's mother." Lips pursed, my wife continued to nod. Did that mean he was listening to me? Almost certainly my words had entered her ear and left on the other. I heard them fall on the living room floor, crumbling like cheap biscuits. Chapter 6. The elevator doors opened noisily. Our plan. I walked down the dark corridor with my bulky suitcase and rang the bell. None answer. I pressed my ear against the cold steel of the door. I kept ringing the bell. 2, 3 4 times, checking that it was not faulty. It worked. I could feel it ring, even if the dampening effect of the door gave the impression that the sound was coming from much further away. I placed the suitcase against the door and looked at the clock. 8 o'clock in the evening. True, my wife was a heavy sleeper, but this was a bit much. I was very tired. I hadn't even eaten. Alone for this time, I would have liked to avoid the hassle of look for the keys. Maybe my wife had called her mother, and it went to the hospital like I told her, or she had gone from relatives in the countryside. But no, as soon as I crossed the threshold, I saw the familiar chaos of his slippers, shoes, gymnastics, elegant shoes. I freed my feet from mine and put on my slippers, unconsciously recording the usual frost of the apartment. But after just a few steps, I noticed of a disgusting smell. I opened the refrigerator. Inside, side dishes of courgettes and cucumbers, all shriveled, were transformed into putrid and smelly lumps. There was some rice left in the electric rice cooker. It was clear that had been there for a while, because he had become annoyed by sticking to the container. When I lifted the lid, The smell, unmistakable old laughter, pervaded my nostrils together with the still warm steam. There was a pile of dishes dirty in the sink, and a sweet smell came from the plastic basin above the washing machine, where the laundry was soaking in gray soapy water. My wife was not in the bedroom, bathroom, or in the guest room, which we used for various things. There I called. No response. In the living room there were only the morning newspaper, opened just as I left it there week before, an empty half-liter milk carton, a glass cup speckled with milk droplets coagulated, one of my wife's white socks, inside out, and a red faux leather purse, all scattered around here and there. The roar of cars speeding on the road was like a tear in the compact mass of the void limited to the apartment. Since I was tired and hungry, given the dishes they were rusting in the sink, and there wasn't a single spoon clean to get some rice, I felt alone. I was returned to an empty house after such a long journey. I wanted to talk about all those trivial things that happen in long-distance flights, of the landscapes that had been glimpsed behind the window of foreign trains, and there was no one to ask me, "Are you tired?" depriving me of the opportunity to demonstrate my resistance with a stoic, "I'm fine." I felt alone. And, because of this loneliness, I became angry. The insignificance of my body gave me the sensation of being fundamentally incapable of being part of the fabric of this world. The chill that was creeping into mine suddenly light clothes, and the thought that the only thing that if I had really succeeded in life was to delude myself that I was appreciated, they made me angry. Alone, and without anyone else if he loved me, my existence would have been worth it already finished. Just at that moment, I heard a faint voice. I turned in the direction of that sound. It was my voice. "Wife." From the veranda came a faint murmur, impossible to decipher. That profound solitude instantly turned into one feeling of relief, and as I headed towards the veranda, I felt a sudden irritation rise to my core. Of the language. "Why didn't you answer me if you were there for all the time?" I violently opened the French door. "It's the way to keep a house, this? What the heck do you have lived these days?" Then I saw my wife's naked body, and I stopped short. She was kneeling, her face turned upwards, her arms raised as if applauding someone. All his body was dark green. The once dull face now. It shone like the shiny leaf of an evergreen. The hair, which previously looked like dried radish leaves, they were shiny like stems of wild herbs. His eyes shone dimly in his green face. Turning around towards me as I backed away, he moved as if to stand up. Instead, spasms shook hers in vain. Legs. He seemed unable to both stand up and walk. Her lithe waist twisted painfully. The language atrophied. She swayed like an aquatic plant among the dark blue lips. There was already no sign of teeth. A single cry, little more than a moan, escaped from them. Pursed lips dotted with light specks. Waterfall. I ran to the sink, turned the tap all the way on, and I filled the plastic basin until it overflowed. 2. Each of my hurried steps, the water splashed on the sides, spilling onto the living room floor, as I returned hastily onto the veranda. As soon as I poured it on the chest of my wife, her whole body experienced a thrill. Rebirth, like the leaf of an enormous plant. I went back in and I filled the basin again, returning to pour it for him. On the head, his hair shot up, as if until then an invisible weight had compressed them. I watched her shimmering green body bloom again with thanks at my baptism. My head was spinning. My wife had never looked so beautiful. Chapter 7. Mom. I am no longer able to write you letters, or have put on the sweater you left here. The sweater of orange wool, what you forgot when you came to find me last winter. I put it on the day after he left for that trip work. You know how much I suffer from the cold. It hadn't been washed, so it still had that smell stale vegetables mixed with the scent of your skin. In a different day, I probably would have washed it, but it did too cold, and then I wanted to keep breathing in that perfume, so I kept it on me. I even fell asleep in it. The next morning, the frost still hadn't eased taken, and perhaps it was because I was so cold and so thirsty that, when the morning sun shone in the window of the bedroom, That cry erupted from my lips choked. Mom. I wanted to be hugged by her warm light, so I went out onto the porch and took off my clothes. The rays of the sun that penetrated my naked flesh were like that similar to your perfume that I knelt there and called.
Mom.
No other words. I wonder how much time has passed. Days, weeks, months? I noticed that the air didn't seem particularly hot. Then I noticed a slight increase in temperature, followed by a similar decline. From one moment to the next, the windows of the apartments all beyond the Chungnang River, they will blaze with a light orange. Can the people who live there see me? And the cars speeding down the street, with light pouring from them their headlights? What do I look like now? He was extremely kind. He bought a large vase and planted me in it. On Sundays passed by, mornings sitting on the threshold of the veranda to take the aphids. He, who is always so exhausted, goes up every morning on the mountain behind our condominium and return with a bucket of mineral water to water my legs. He remembered that I don't like tap water. Some time ago, he emptied the vase and replaced the earth with a quantity of fertile new soil. When at night the rain cleans the city air a little, in the morning he opens the front door and windows completely to circulate fresh air. It's strange, Mom. Even without seeing, hearing, smell, and taste, everything seems fresher, more alive. I feel the rough friction of the tires when they touch the asphalt, the imperceptible resonance of his footsteps when he opens the front door and comes towards me, the air saturated with rain that swells with fertile dreams, the gray twilight of dawn. I hear buds sprouting and petals opening in nearby places, and far away, the larvae emerge from the cocoon. Dogs and cats give birth their cubs, the tremulous swing of the heartbeat of the old man in the building next door, the spinach blanching in a saucepan in the kitchen upstairs, a bunch of cut chrysanthemums that are placed in a vase next to the gramophone in the apartment below. Day or night, the stars describe a quiet parabola, and every time the sun rises, the sycamores along the road bend their bodies, longing towards the east. My body also responds to it same way. Can you understand? Soon, I know, I will also lose the ability to think, but I'm fine. It's been a long time now I dreamed of this, being able to live only on wind, sun, and water. Thoughts from when I was little, when I ran into the kitchen and I buried my face in your skirt, that delicious smell, the smell of sesame oil, of sautéed sesame seeds pan. I always had my hands in the dirt, you know. My dirty hand dirted the hem of your skirt. How old would I have been? That hazy spring day of drizzle, Dad, who hoisted me onto the tractor and drove up to the beach. The carefree laughter of the adults below rain, children with wet hair stuck to the front, who hopped around and waved, their faces swirling and becoming blurry. That poor seaside village was your whole world. 6 born and raised there. You gave birth there, worked there, you're aged there. At some point you will be buried next to Dad, in sector of the cemetery reserved for our family. It was the fear of ending up like you, Mother, that pushed me to moving away from home so much. I left to 17 years, and the urban districts of Busan, Taegu, and Gangnam, where I wandered aimlessly for more than a month, they remained imprinted in my memory. Lying about mine age in a Japanese restaurant, running errands alone, the evenings curled up in a fetal position in the living room reading, I liked that place. The dazzling lights of city, the glittering charm of the people who lived there. I don't know when I first became aware of the fact that in the end I would find myself old and broken wandering those streets crowded with strangers. I was unhappy at home and equally unhappy elsewhere, so tell me, where should I have gone? I have never been happy. Maybe it's heavy on my shoulders, perpetually a tormented soul, which clings to me to the throat and limbs. My only wish is always state of running away, a basic impulse, the pain that causes a scream, the pinch that generates a scream. Sitting with knees pressed to chest at the back of the bus, with the air of someone who wouldn't hurt a fly, throughout for a long time I wanted to break glass with my fist. Longing of the blood that would flow from my hand. I would have licked like a cat drinks milk. From what I was looking for, run away, what afflicted me to the point that I did want to escape to the other side of the world. And what was it holding me back, shackling me, paralyzing me? Which stumps oppressed me, preventing the leap he would have made renewed this sick blood. The elderly doctor tapped the stethoscope repeatedly. With his finger, muttering that the inside of my body was silent as a grave, that the only perceptible sounds were the echoing gusts of a distant wind. He put it down, stethoscope on the table, and brought the ultrasound screen closer. I lay still as he spread a slimy gel on me, on my belly, and then he passed an instrument over my flesh. Cold, stick-shaped, methodically descending from the solar plexus to the lower abdomen, apparently via that tool. A black and white image of mine viscera was transmitted to the screen. "It's normal," he murmured and clicked his tongue.
What?
"Let's see now." "It's his intestines." "It's absolutely not there. Nothing wrong here." Everything was declared normal. Stomach, liver, uterus, kidneys, they're all fine, because he didn't see that these organs were slowly atrophying, and soon they would be disappeared. I wiped the gel off with a handful of tissues, of paper, but when I tried to get up, he told me to lie down again. He pressed my belly in different places. It wasn't particularly painful. When he threw me a distracted, "Does it hurt?" I looked at his face with hatred, bespectacled, and continued to shake my head. "Everything okay here? Doesn't it hurt here?" "No." He gave me an injection, and on the way home I vomited again. I crouched in the subway station with the back leaning against the wall covered with tiles. I counted as I waited for the pain to subside. The doctor told me to relax, to think about sweet and soothing things. Everything is a reflection of ours mind, he had said, in the sing-song voice of a master Buddhist. Consoling, comforting thoughts. 1, 2, 3, 4, infinite peace, counting and trying not to vomit. The pain brought tears to my eyes as spasms seized me, and I regurgitated gastric juice again and again, until finally there was nothing left and I could collapse on the floor. I waited for the ground there stop swaying. Damn it, just yes would stop. How long ago was it? "Mom, I keep having the same dream. Dream of become as tall as a poplar." Background: the ceiling of the veranda, and also that of the upstairs on the 15th floor of the 16th, growing visibly and piercing the reinforced concrete until I passed the roof in top of everything. White larvae-like flowers bloomed from my upper extremities. My trachea, so tense that it looks like it should burst, it absorbs clear water. My chest soars up to the sky, and I force myself to stretch out every branch. This is how I escape from this apartment. Everything is fine. Night, mother, every night the same dream. The days are getting colder. Even today this world will have seen many leaves fall to the ground, many snakes shed their skin, many insects shed their tiny lives, and many frogs begin winter hibernation, a little early. I keep thinking about your sweater. The memory of your perfume is no longer so clear. I would ask him to wrap it around me, but now I've lost the word. What can I do? He cries when he sees me consumption and gets angry, too. As you know, I was all his family. I can make out her warm tears, mixed together to the mountain water that pours on me. I feel the molecules of air in turmoil, his closed fist shaking without a target. I'm scared, Mom. My limbs must be falling off. This vase is too small, its walls too hard.
Pain.
Stabbing at the tips of my roots. Mom, I'm going to die before winter arrives. And I doubt I will flourish again in this world. Chapter 8. The evening of my return from a business trip. After that, I watered my wife with 3 basins full of water. She vomited a quantity of yellow gastric juice. I looked at them. His lips purse and then quickly merge again, flesh and flesh, right before my eyes, while with trembling fingers I groped for those lips covered with white specks. At the end I heard a faint voice like this, so weak that I couldn't understand what he said. That was it. The last time I heard my wife's voice. After that, there wasn't even a single moan anymore. A thick bundle of white roots sprouted from inside her thighs. Dark red flowers bloomed from his chest. Stamens double, white at the ends, yellowish and thick. At the root, they emerged from her nipples. When his raised hand still managed to exercise a minimum pressure, my wife wanted to hug me. Watching those eyes, in which a pale light still shone me. I bent down, welcoming the embrace of his petal-like hands. Of Camellia. "Are you okay?" I asked. His eyes, two clusters. Ripe trees on whose lacquered surface the shadow of a shimmered
smile.
As autumn advanced, I observed a clear light, orange, gradually permeate my wife's body. When I opened the window, his arms stretched upwards. They swayed slightly, moving in the current. Towards the end of autumn, its leaves began to grow. Fall 2, 3 at a time. His body, from orange that was, slowly turned a dull brown. I thought about the last time I had made love with her. Instead of the acrid smell of bodily fluids, I had. On that occasion, I noticed a vaguely unusual smell. Sweet, coming from my wife's lower half. At the time I had imagined that he simply had changed soap, or that, having nothing better to do, if she had sprayed a few drops of perfume in her lower parts. How long ago had this happened? Now its shape barely retains a trace of the biped that it was in the past. His irises, which seemed transformed into shiny rounded bunches, they come little at a time, covered by brown filaments. Not my wife. He sees no more, he can't even flex the extremities of his
stems.
But when I go out on the porch, I get a feeling, confused, that cannot be expressed, similar to a lowercase, pulsating electric current that leaves his body and enters in mine. When the leaves that were once the hands and my wife's hair all fell out, and the point where hers lips had joined, he split, letting out a handful of fruits. That sensation ceased like a thread
thin that breaks.
The tiny fruits had splattered out in droves like pomegranate seeds. I gathered them in my hands and sat on them. Threshold that connects the veranda to the living room stay. These fruits that I saw for the first time were green, yellowish, and they were hard like sunflower seeds that, yes, they're served together with popcorn to accompany the beer. I chose one and put it in my mouth. The skin was smooth, totally tasteless and odorless. I chewed it, the fruit of the only woman I had ever had on this earth. There, the first thing my palate perceived was an acidic taste, almost pungent, and the juice that remained at the root of the tongue had an exclusively bitter aftertaste. The following day, I bought about 10 round jars and, after filling them with soil, I planted the fruits inside. I lined up the jars next to my wife's by now withered, and I opened the window. I looked out and smoked one cigarette, savoring the smell of fresh grass that had flowered. Suddenly, from my wife's nether regions, the wind, late autumn cold, ruffled the cigarette smoke and my long hair. Would my wife sprout again in the spring? Would its flowers have been red? I didn't have the slightest idea. The end.